Good evening. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Many years of choir, I can project. First of all, I'd like to thank the committee for allowing me to speak here this evening. As you mentioned, I've been a president of a neighborhood association myself for a number of years. I know the dedication and commitment and the time that you are giving to your community, and it is very appreciated. Thank you all very much. So, I am not a professional politician. I am a lot like all of you. I am someone who cares about my community, who cares about my neighborhood, and who believes that it is a wonderful, wonderful place to live, but also believes that we can definitely make it better. I am a strong believer in spending money now so that you can reap the rewards of that funding later, and investing in our community. As mentioned, I've been involved in many development fight myself, and I think that it's very easy for developers to come in, to make a proposal, to build something and walk away, and we're the ones who have to live with it. I think it's important that the city start making sure that developers have the plans and have the understanding of how something is going to affect a community before it be allowed to be built and be permitted. Also, the city, can do a better job of informing us about what's going on with permitting processes and what's going on with particular development projects. I don't know about all of you, but we've had instances where we voted on something and 2 years later there's still a hole in the ground and we don't know what's going on. It's 2017, there's the internet. Postings can be made very easily. One of my biggest issues is transportation. And I don't know about any of you, but I have yet to see any more new land being created in Boston. And that, if you find it, let me know. I want to see it. And that means that we're running out of space to put cars. We're running out of space to put roads, and we need to think about other options. And one of the biggest options that I think that we need to embrace is an inner harbor ferry. We've been talking about it. Go ahead. Absolutely. We had a ferry previously, and it was taken away, unfortunately, and East Boston has been talking about the ferry every single day since then. The city hasn't paid for it because it doesn't help enough of us. But what if we built it now and it helped all of us? What if we started a ferry and it started at the airport at the Hyatt, it went to East Boston, it went to Charlestown, it came here to the North End, it went over to the main part of Boston, it stopped over at the Red Line and South Station, and then went out to the seaport. I've talked to a number of residents who told me that getting out to the seaport is the reason that they own a vehicle. Not because they want it, not because they want to shovel it out, but because they have no other way to get there. I've talked to residents who work at Kendall Square, and they tell me the exact same thing. So an inner harbor ferry is one of the ways that we're going to solve that. And eventually, this is the first step, eventually you're going to see a ferry that goes up the Mystic, that connects us all the way up to Assembly Square, that connects us to Wellington. That's a little further out, but eventually that's what we're going to need to do, because there's no more land and there's no other places to put roads. And as my friend Nate, who's sitting over there in the corner, he's a transportation specialist, loves to tell me that a road isn't the best use of land anyway. I'm sorry, I had to give him a hard time because he's hiding in the corner. I apologize.
He actually left.
Oh, he's Oh, he did? Okay, later on you guys can all go, hi, Nate.
He's a really good hire.
Also in transportation, so there are people that will never get rid of their car. They either have children, they have a job, they have to get to it, that's fine. But we need to make it as easy as possible for everyone else. And that means increasing our MBTA. That means expanding it out to Somerville. That means expanding the Blue Line out to Lynn. That means expanding the number of buses that you have going through here in the North End along Atlantic Avenue so that you can get picked up and dropped off at Haymarket Station. So that if you're a parent or if it's a rainy day, you don't have to worry about getting to the T. You don't have to worry about walking. You can get there by group transportation, lowering the number of cars. There's a bunch of other issues that I'd like to talk about. Open space, I'm a big fan of it myself. I'm actually very proud. One of the things that I'm most proud of that I accomplished at the Jeffreys Point Neighborhood Association is that I helped create the second urban orchard in the city of Boston. The first one's down in Jamaica Plain, no surprise. But the second one is now in East Boston. It's on Marginal Street. And we're going to be bringing down children for school groups. We're going to be bringing down play groups. And we're going to be involving the community in caring for this area. So it's not only a way to combat hunger because we can harvest those fruits, but we can also use it as a way to learn for all of our children. And what I really like best about this is that it's a public-private partnership. It's a nonprofit organization, Eastie Farm, pairing with the city, because the city was willing to build it, they weren't willing to take care of it, which seems to be a theme. If you've ever tried to build a dog park, that's exactly what they're going to tell you. We'll build it, we won't take care of it. Yeah, I'm sure you have. I'm sure you have. And the reality is we need to have more of those. One of the things I specialize in is creating partnerships. At North Suffolk Mental Health Association, I'm a director of development and I do their marketing. And I've created multiple partnerships with other organizations and with the city so that we can provide our services to more and more people. I have a lot of other things that I know about, but I don't want to give you a standard spiel. I'd like to ask what is important to you and what questions can I answer? It's okay, someone can be first. You like me that much? I convinced you all already.
No, I have a question.
Okay, ready?
I like what you say, but I was a little concerned about what you talked about development. I think before we get to the point of them saying, oh, this is what it's going to look like, standing codes and things need to be enforced. I mean, along the waterfront, they're just being tossed out the window. Chapter 91, coastal zoning management. Where do you stand on that? And the development, I mean, they're developers with deep, deep pockets.
So we're actually having that exact same issue in East Boston. And a big part of it is the fact that the ISD is incredibly understaffed. They say that having the same number of people that they have now that they had in 2008 before the building boom even started is enough to find all of the code violations and then be able to enforce them. And the reality is it's not. And so what needs to happen is we need to use the money that we're getting from the permits, because the city's making an incredible amount of money when people apply for a permit. I mean, it's $55,000 to get a sidewalk permit.
But we know in the developer and the, I don't know, whatever the BRA is calling themselves now, we know about the particular
okay, great.
laws
So
and codes that they are dismissing. And they've basically said, this is what we're doing.
So I usually say this for my closing, but I'll say it now. And this is that I'm the only person in this race who doesn't work for the mayor. And that puts me in a position that I would answer only to the people that elected me. And that I would be able to argue and fight for issues like that and basically go after them and tell them, I don't care who you know, I don't care what your pockets are, you're not allowed to hurt the community and benefit yourself.
Thank you.
That's the best answer I can.
It's a good one.
Okay, you in the back?
Even the mayor said, when he first became mayor and before he became mayor, that we must reform the BRA. And he began to do that and went nowhere with it. Almost 4 years later, we have no reforms at the BRA. And some of us know that they're a worse agency now than they ever were under Menino. The first and only way, really, to reform that agency is to take planning back. And I say take planning back because when that agency was formed back in 1957, it was a development agency. Their role still, #1 role, is to promote development in the city of Boston, and that means supporting developers' interests. And yet, later on, not long after 1957, they were handed the planning authority in the city of Boston. So they have planning authority, which means they have zoning authority, which means they control the zoning commission and to some extent the zoning board. And we need to take planning away from the BRA. Any thoughts on that?
So my thought is, I'm not convinced we need to take it away because they're not doing it.
Correct.
Yeah.
But that's the whole reason you want to take it away.
Yeah, but let me just say this, is that a significant number of communities in the city, well actually all but I think 2, need to have master plans rewritten. And that includes the North End. The master plans need to happen. I have actually been fighting, I've argued personally with Brian Golden and said that the communities need to have a master plan rewritten. And I've actually yelled at him and said to him, why don't you put out guidelines giving us an idea of how this starts so that we as communities can start writing them. And honestly, I think that's one of the best ways to go, is to start as a community, to review the old master plan and get ready for the master plan process. So that when they walk in the door and they say, oh, well, we think this is what you should do, and everyone looks at them and says, no, we live here, we're the ones who know what's the way the community is, and this is the way that the master plan should be written and this should be included. I actually think it should be a community-driven process, the master planning process. I'm not thrilled that it's the BPDA who kind of oversees it. I agree with you, because they do have a lot of control. It really should be more working with a consultant on a community-to-community basis, and that would actually allow them to be going on simultaneously throughout the city. Because currently what's happening is they're doing 2 at a time. Yeah.
So I guess it kind of was a follow-up to that. I guess my biggest concern was, I think the community base works, particularly along our waterfront, but I'm at the northern end of the north end, and certainly my biggest impact is everything that's going on in the garden, and that's the Bullfinch Triangle that's not in the north end. And so there's enough of our edges that are being affected by other edges. So I think community-based to start it is great, but I think there's a broader vision that all of these neighborhoods feel as we're all abutting each other. So I think it's bigger than that personally. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay. Well, one of the positives of doing it as a community-based process means that it could be ongoing at the same time. So instead of like you doing one and then that triangle doing a planning process, it would have the ability to interact at the same time. You'd be able to talk to one another, and you'd be able to find out what they're thinking of and what you're thinking of. Currently, it's done as a one-on-one and then one-on-one, and I think that would actually exacerbate the problem that you just brought up, is that one neighborhood would do it and then another neighborhood would be doing it later. Whereas if it was a community-based process and you were working with a consultant, you know, maybe you would have the same consultant working for both organizations, so they'd have the opportunity to talk and to kind of hash out some of those details. Did I answer you? You don't look thrilled.
Well, I just think it's a bigger issue, and it's broader than that. And I think there needs to be some effort to kind of globally look at the pieces and the parts here, and that doesn't always work on a neighborhood basis. But I love the idea of the neighborhood voice.
So
Neighborhood voice has to be in the planning process, obviously, has to be in the planning process.
Currently, but it's
the authority, I'm talking about the authority for planning and the authority for zoning in the city of Boston lies, unfortunately, with the BRA. I'm not going to call them by their new name because you yourself said that they don't do planning, so I call them Boston Planning and Development Agency. They haven't been able to do it for the 50 years since they were given planning authority. There's no way they're ever going to do it. They're not capable of doing it, and this mayor is not going to require them to do it. So we've got to take planning back from the BRA, create a planning board, create a planning department, as there was when the BRA was originally created back in 1957. But they didn't want to have to develop in accordance with somebody else's plans, including community plans.
So I'm gonna stop you for a second. I'm gonna go back to that gentleman first, and then I'm gonna answer you again. So you had said that you wanted to see more of a universal process.
Well, a broader vision.
A broader vision,
Yep.
And that's actually going on right now. The Boston 2030 is the Boston-wide master plan that the city's actually currently working on, and is a report that they are planning on putting out in the next year or so. So that process has already been ongoing for, I would say, probably at least a year or two. So that is already occurring, and that's actually one of the reasons that I support the community process, because now that we've had the universal that's kind of coming down to an end, now's the time where we can take that and we can continue on with it. So to go back to your point, let's be honest, everything's getting approved right now. Do you guys feel that way?
Oh, yeah.
From the CPA, yeah.
Despite the community input.
Absolutely, and I have seen that many times myself. So the reason that that's happening is because the mayor has created an ambitious goal, and it's actually not a bad goal, in theory, to create 53,000 new units of housing by 2030. That's why the ZBA is approving everything, build, 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 build. And what's happening is, instead of having kind of smarter development in terms of going out to like Suffolk Downs and building, you know, like 10,000 units out there, or going down to Whitehead Circle and building down there, what's happening is they're knocking down 3 families and they're putting up 12 units. We've all seen it. And so part of the way that I think that we need to resolve that issue and take the pressure off of the community is by enforcing universities to build more dorm space. Because if we put the onus on them to build between 5,000 and 8,000 dorm rooms, that's pulling out 5 to 8. That's pulling out actually probably closer to 9,000 or 10,000 students out of the Boston area. Then you don't need to have 3 bedrooms with 3 bathrooms in a basement that's probably going to have 6 to 9 kids in it. because they're going to be forced to live on the dorm. You can be required, a university can do this, can require students to live on campus for up to 1 to 3 years. Most of them don't want them senior year, that's fine. But at least we would be pulling them out of the community and relieving the pressure. And in exchange for telling universities that we would give them a little bit of leeway in terms of zoning, but they would need to go out to someplace like Whitehead Circle, they need to go out to Forest Hills, they need to go out to Suffolk Downs, and there they'd be able to build one large building. And let's be honest, nobody really wants students. I mean, someone who's in Alston who's getting a lot of money, I mean, for having them live there, they're probably thrilled. But you want students that when they get into trouble, which they're gonna do, they're away from home for the first time, you want them to be met by a dean, not a police officer. You want them to be picked up by the student's campus security, not by a state. We want them to be overseen. So we need to push the issue of having more dorms be built. I mean, the universities are allowed to increase the number of students they come in as much as they want. And yet we haven't been telling them, okay, you live here in this community, you have this university here, and in many instances you have $1 billion endowments, so we know you have the funding, you need to build more dorm space to handle the students that you have. So, sir?
What's your plan to improve basic city services? That's like my biggest pet peeve, and I agree with the gentleman who spoke, Dave, about citywide planning, but around in this neighborhood, and we have priorities obviously for the district about focusing on the quality of life issues. And I like the ferry idea. Could you just answer how you're going to pay for that?
I'm going to pay for it because it's going to be a combination of things. It's going to be a public-private partnership. Companies like Vertex Pharmaceuticals, like GM, especially in the Seaport area that are really struggling to get people to come out and work there because they can't get there. I'd like to see them make a contribution. In order to be successful, it needs to be part of the MBTA system. You're going to need to tap in, even if it's a monthly card. And then also I think that it could be marketed to tourists during the non-peak times. During peak times, it needs to be a commuter boat, but during the non-peak times, a couple of years ago, I went around and I took a Harbour tour. I paid $25. They drove to Charlestown, they dropped off some people, and they drove back. It wasn't much of a Harbour tour. So I mean, for certain hours of the day, say maybe between 10 and 3, we could have a hop-on, hop-off pass, like they do for the buses. And again, it gets them off the streets. But in answer to your question about basic city services, I'm actually really thrilled that you asked that. It's one of the reasons that I actually ran for office is because we all know that our government can run better, and it should. If you have a hard time getting a parking pass, you're not going to believe that if your house goes, if something goes wrong with your house, that they're going to be able to help you easily. And the answer to that is both simple and complicated, and that's technology. An incredible amount of work that's done at City Hall is done by paper still. An incredible amount of work is done by fax. They don't use emails. They've had to change the email system at City Hall, I think, twice now, because it's so clunky and it gets so full that it doesn't operate, so they've got to throw it out and start over again. I figured that out one day when I went to email someone and their email address didn't work. It turned out they'd gone to first name dot last name as opposed to like first initial last name. Great way to figure it out when I needed to get a hold of something. But we really do need to have more technology, and we also need to have more coordination. I mean, I don't know about all of you, but going up Atlantic Ave the other day and seeing that horribly ugly concrete sidewalk when it should have been either brick or it should be painted to look like brick and have tons of trees so it's a welcoming thoroughfare, and then seeing what they did, it ticked me off. I'm not going to lie to you. I was angry at our city because our city can do better. I mean, I think that the North End is a gorgeous historic district. It should be treated with respect in the historic district, and thought needs to be put in how the area is presented. You're part of our face to the world for people who come from everywhere. So I know that doesn't entirely, I went off on a little bit of a tangent there. Sorry, I get a little angry sometimes. But anyway, pardon me, I don't want to take
that's okay. I'm going to end the questions now because our next speaker has also arrived. Some time, but I would like to thank you very much for coming. And sure, I'll let you do that, but I would just say also if you want to stick around in the little time after the meeting to maybe we'll welcome to do that. Sure.
I just want to close up by thanking you again for having me here this evening. I appreciate the questions that you had. I know that they're certainly not everything. I do have a website, margaretforboston.org, and I encourage you all to check it out so you can learn more about my positions. And I would be very grateful for all of your votes on September 26th. Thank you very much.